Welcome to the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. My name is Lauren Wells, here with my co-host, Chris Seveny. We're committed to providing you with the knowledge required to build wealth through real estate investing. Tired of consuming content about real estate? Stuck in analysis paralysis? Ready to do your first deal? As a member of our community, you will learn how to go from consuming content to taking that first step into the world of real estate investing. Our show is not about getting rich quick, but about providing you with the knowledge you need to take action. Join us as we speak with experienced investors who share action tips on how to escape the corporate world, start a thriving side hustle in the world of real estate, and go beyond your W-2 or 401k.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. I am your co-host, Chris Seveny, flying somewhat solo today without my partner in crime, Lauren, who wasn't able to make it. But today we do have a special guest. We have Josh Ziegelbaum. Josh is with the Legacy Group. And prior to that, he was vice president of business development for a company called Life of Arc Capital, which was a boutique private equity and asset management firm where he led capital raising efforts. And prior to that, he was a private banker for Wells Fargo. So is this episode, I think it's going to be important for people to listen because we're going to talk about raising capital, which is something a lot of investors and people look to do when they're trying to be an entrepreneur and go out on their own. So Josh, how are you today?
Chris, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks and you are down in Florida. So it's, I know you were, I don't believe impacted by that hurricane, but is everything going well down there?
Fortunately, we were not. I'm in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale. So we were pretty unscathed from the hurricane that just went through. Unfortunate to see that happen, of course. All is well here in Fort Lauderdale, fortunately.
Cool. Could you start telling us a little bit about Legacy Group, what it is you do? Because I thought it was actually interesting concept of what it is you're doing with the Legacy Group.
Sure. Happy to do that, Chris. So I'm the director of investor relations at Legacy Group. We're a private equity asset manager, and we invest in agriculture in Latin America through our portfolio company, Green Coffee Company. We also invest in other early stage businesses in the region, but we're very much focused on investments that produce high social and environmental impact in Latin America, more specifically in Colombia. My day-to-day is raising capital, doing investor relations. We just initiated a Series C funding round for Green Coffee Company, our Legacy Group portfolio company that I just mentioned. And kind of like the day-to-day is investor communications, sharing documents, opening deal rooms, making sure everyone's informed. It's a Reg D 506C offering for those of you that are interested in learning about raising capital. So we raise from accredited investors. So we have a high net worth group of investors, primarily from the US. Investor base is just over 300. So I cultivate and grow that, continue to add value for the business. That's my main function of what I do at Legacy Group.
Cool. With the Reg D offering, what's the minimum investment that the firm looks at?
Yeah, we have a minimum investment of $100,000 US.
Okay. Yep. So that's pretty common we have a lot of listeners who we've done several Regulation D offerings in the past, discussed a lot of that. The people on the podcast in the past it's good that actually Lauren's not here because you do the same thing she does for us. I'm kind of the nuts and bolts of managing, buying assets from our type of work that we do. So I enjoy having conversations with other people that raise money as well. And with raising money, what have you found is some of the misconceptions of the space, especially when dealing with accredited investors, as well as some of the hot topics or the most frequently asked questions that people kind of come to you at, or if somebody was looking to raise money, what should they be prepared to be able to answer to people?
Yeah, it's on the outside looking in, people think, oh, you have a high net worth group of people, they'll be interested in investing. When I left public markets world with my career at Wells Fargo and started working in private, I soon realized that high net worth clients aren't necessarily interested in private placements. So that's an important reality that I think people need to face when they're going to raise capital. It's not just who are the wealthy people in my network, it's who are the people who I can touch base with who invest passively in syndicated offerings. So I think that's a very important one, and trying to identify where those people are. And some of them might be listening to podcasts, they might be at conferences, at events. We've seen a lot in mastermind groups, so organizations of investors who collectively analyze projects and invest together as either part of a syndicate or individually. So really kind of identifying who your client is and where to find them is very much key. I think other questions people would want to know is from start to finish, like, how do you do this? What are the documents you need? What is the regulatory component? There's plenty of attorneys out there, securities attorneys, that can help guide anyone looking to do this on kind of fund documents and setting things up from a compliance angle. So that's an important piece, but it's one that could be outsourced. The one that couldn't be outsourced as much is identifying investors. That's really, I'd say, where the challenge would lie for anyone who's looking to raise capital. If you want to just set up a fund, and you can pay a lawyer to do that, but like you know this, being an asset manager, identifying opportunities to invest in is another piece of it, right? So you said you have someone else on your team that does my role. At our company, we have two partners who live in Medellin, Colombia, and they handle the day-to-day of the business. They sit on the board of the company. They are a steward of the investor's capital along with myself. So there's a whole team that goes involved into it. It's not just the raising of the capital, it's deploying it intelligently. Without a good product, investors will not be interested, right? So that's a whole other piece. Like, do they invest passively? Maybe the answer is yes, but is your deal one that they would be interested in?
Yeah, what we found, and I'm curious to ask this question because you're also investing, internationally. With our investments, there's an education component, not only about how to invest, but what is it that you do? I mean, we invest in mortgage notes, and most people think, oh, well, what is that? Because they know kind of like real estate, but mortgage notes is something we really have to spend a lot of time and energy educating people on because they don't understand it. And I'm curious because while you're doing stuff in Colombia, do you have to educate a lot of people about that? And also, I'm sure a common question is part of the risk-based being in, an investment group in South America as well. But I'm curious about the education component.
That's a huge piece of it, of course. It's important to note that while the assets are primarily in Colombia, we have a U.S. investment structure. So investors participate in common equity ownership at a holding company level here in the U.S. that owns all the assets down there. So that allows investors to kind of wrap their heads around things a bit better. Like, oh, I'm investing in the U.S. actually in a company that owns foreign assets. So there's comfort there, and of course, education that goes beyond it. But you're right. It's an emerging market. It's an industry that most investors don't know much about. Most of our investors are in real estate. They're in the stock market. They're business owners, and they're looking for diversification into other markets and other asset classes. So education is key. We do weekly newsletters to keep people informed of things that are going on in the alternative investment space, in Colombia, in coffee. We do not heavy, but relatively in-depth investor updates every quarter, which we do formally. We hold webinars with live Q&A. We have individualized meetings where we set up 30 minutes to an hour to address questions and provide education. Definitely is an educational component to it. So when you get people into your ecosystem and their eyes are on you, maybe their interest is piqued, but you need to cultivate that relationship over time through education and value add content.
Yeah, and a lot of what you just said resonates with something that we focus on a lot. Is there's the nurturing of the relationship with the investors, educate them to get them, to invest. And then I find it's actually more work after the fact to keep them informed, communicating with them and continue that education. So there's no, what I'll call, surprises down the road where somebody says they may not have known something, what was going on. So that's something, it sounds like you do an excellent job with the amount of content that you're putting out to all your investors.
Oh, definitely.
So what has been the biggest challenge of, once Legacy Group started to raise, especially with Colombia, with the coffee, and getting out there and, again, networking, finding the right people, how long has it taken? Because I think a lot of people have this misconception of, oh, great, I have a fund and I have a Regulation D. Great. Like you said, you can't have any attorney do it, but then you have to actually go out and build those relationships. I think people don't realize the amount of time it takes to go from, great, we're doing this, and now we can go solicit people through the Reg D 506C, accredited investors, to ramp up to scale that offering. And I'm curious if you want to share a little bit of experience with that.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, when we set out to do this, you're looking uphill, right? You're like, okay, I got to raise this much money and who am I going to sell it to, right? You might have this little network, but you really have to grow it over years and years and years, different events, different initiatives that drive people to subscribe to your newsletter or put them in contact with you in a personal manner, whatever your strategy is. And it's really a long game. We've been successful in the sense that we've gone from 10 million in assets under management of equity committed about a year and a half ago to just about 40 million today. Very strong growth trajectory for the business. And we just initiated a $25 million equity round. And what's good about things as you kind of go forward is that it snowballs. There's somewhat of an effect where your past investors reinvest. They tell other friends, and those friends then invest. And it's almost like a web, so to speak. So we've found that if you can speak once to a large group of people, whether that's through a podcast, it's through a webinar, it's through a group presentation, that's a very effective use of your time. So if we can get 20, 30, 40 high net worth individuals in a room, have them listen to a presentation, that's much more effective than having an individual call with all of them. We do both. So we do individualized conversations and calls, but usually they're follow-ups to group presentation that we do. So we'll approach, various networks and do that. We've been successful in that regard. I think that's like the main point.
Well, the other thing, it sounds like are you the person that's talking with a lot of these investors or someone in your office?
That's right. Yeah, I'm the main point of contact for our investors, but we do have other members of the capital raise team. We have a VP of business development, Dustin Baldwin, who's done a great job in our pre-Series C and our Series C round. And we have another VP of capital raising, partners assist in the capital raise. So we're all client facing to a certain extent, but I'd say I'm the main point of contact.
And I was mentioning that because similar to on our end, when people have reached out and called us, they're surprised that I'm actually speaking to a human. And and it's interesting because, for us, they pick up call Lauren and she's out in California and, holds a conversation with them. And they didn't actually think they'd actually get someone or they get a call center or something like that. And it's like, oh no, you're when we tell you, we will speak with you, we will speak with you. And I think that also goes a long way when it's forward facing. And I know with COVID and a lot of this being done by Zoom, I think has been helpful because things that might have been done over the phone now you could do by Zoom and actually get to see that, hey, Josh is a real person. Chris is a real person. You're getting to see that person versus somebody on the phone trying to talk to you about an investment that's $100,000, which I don't care how much money people have. It's a lot of money. And it's something that they have to be extremely comfortable with investing in.
Yeah. The personal approach is the way to go. Investors want to know that you're real. They want to see you on a video call if they can't meet in person. They want a person that's genuine to them. I think leading with genuinity and with confidence is key, right? People will pick up they could tell you you're a good person on the phone, right? It's harder to tell through an email, but that's also a very important piece of it, right? The way in which you respond to people. A lot of the communication is written before you get on a phone call. So I would tell your listeners who are looking to sit out and do this, it's not so much, get guys interested, get on calls. It's feed content, add value, answer questions in written form in very professional manner. Often you'll get 5-10 questions as a reply to an email newsletter. Like, what happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? And you'll have to, craft very nice responses. And based on those responses, that'll dictate if these people want to talk to you or if they want to invest. So if you're doing it with a team, so let's say you're someone such as yourself, and you have deals, you have a strategy, and you're building out a team, you want to make sure that whoever is the one talking to the clients knows the material like the back of their hand. And because clients will see right through it if they don't. So at our team, Director of Investor Relations, direct contact with a lot of the clients. I've seen other setups where they'll filter through an associate for the first people that come in. And I think a lot of people might get lost at that stage speaking to, I'm not saying that there's not a place in an organization for an associate or an analyst level person, but when you're talking about 100K tickets with multimillionaire investors, they want to talk to someone that can speak the same language as them. And they might often be turned off getting some junior level type of employee right out the gate. So it's important to think about all that as you're narrowing down your approach.
No, that's 100% the truth. And Lauren, who's our VP of Investor Relations, has done asset management. So she's managed the assets. So when people ask about specific things like, oh, well, do you do this and that? She knows it. She can just, rattle off. And it's interesting, like you talk about, a lot of that content goes out. And speaking with people, I was on a call earlier this week with a potential investor. And you mentioned about being able to see people and how honest they are and stuff. A person asked a question. And I point blank said, I do not know the answer to that, but I will look into it and get back to you. And I think for people, sometimes they get the feeling like they have to answer every question. You don't have to answer every question. Now, there's certain questions you absolutely should know about the basics of the business, but this was like a complex tax question. And I said, hey, look, we have accountants on staff and we, use third party, CPA. We use everybody that is experts in that basically, I will get that information from you, but I am not the right person to answer a tax question. And, give that person an answer, went back, got the answer for them, emailed it to them. And, basically, and they said, hey, thanks. That's exactly what I was looking for. And I've been on calls because I'm also an investor. And when I ask people a question, they give an answer, but it wasn't an answer. And they go around and you could tell that they struggled, with the answer. Or it's similar to like, I have kids. You ask a kid, did you get your homework done? And then if you have that 2-second pause, and then all of a sudden it's like, I think so, or something. It's like the pause right there tells you right then and there, like, oh, they didn't do it, and stuff. So trust me, investors can see that and read that. So just be comfortable. If you don't know the answer to something, just be upfront and honest. Say, hey, look, let me get back to you on that. So,
that's a great point. For sure, Chris. Yeah. I mean, that's one that we practice. Like, do not make up an answer. So it's one of your investors that will come back and haunt you, I'm sure.
So I'm curious, what got you out of, so you were Wells Fargo, private banking, I'm sure, that was something that, probably was, a very, probably doing very well in that line of work and so forth. So what got you to go from that to start working in the private equity side?
I love that question, Chris. So I was very happy in my career at the bank because I was able to help clients. I was able to have an individualized approach, similar to what we do now, but with public securities and with bank products. And it just made me so happy to build genuine relationships with people. That part of the business I loved. And then financial services is it's my passion. So I was aligned there. After, 5-6 years, kind of at the tail end of my stint there, I started realizing that the value that I was creating was not, I had a great relationship with people. I was able to make them comfortable. But in terms of the products that we were offering, they were very black and white in the sense that every other bank had them. So if it's an ETF, it's a mutual fund, it's a mortgage, the depository account, whatever it is. I mean, we're able to provide white glove service, make the client happy. But they'll come in, they'll be like, oh, well, what's the difference between this and what I get next door? And then I'm like, oh, well, nothing, I guess. You get to deal with me. There were other reasons as well. The larger corporate structure does not lead one to really excel through effort. Like, you can climb through the ranks as I did over time. I had a nice decorated career, which I'm grateful for. And it got me here. But you kind of hit walls, and then you're in a position where, okay, I'm a private banker in this office, but someone has my job at the company, like hundreds of them around the country. So you're like one of many that is easily replaceable, and you're offering products that are from everyone else. So I wanted something that was more rewarding, that was more interesting, that I could have a product or service that a client could not get anywhere else. I was always driven to Latin America. My wife is Mexican, speaks Spanish, and I love the culture. And I'm down in South Florida, which is very much the Latin America of the US, I guess you can call it. So it's kind of driven to that market. I knew that there was opportunity there. I ended up finding partners who I work with now through a LinkedIn job ad for that VP of business development role that you mentioned. And from there, we pivoted to what we're doing today at Legacy Group, and they brought me in to head up investor relations. But it was kind of almost out of frustration that, like, I don't have a great offering for my clients. I want a more dynamic environment where I could add more value. And I found just that in private equity.
So I want to talk a little bit about, the coffee side of things, because, there's a green coffee company, which is, I know you've got several other offerings in your portfolio, but I think green coffee is the latest. And, what drove the company to get into, I mean, of course, everybody loves, I do have to ask you a question first. I'm assuming you drink coffee.
I do.
Yes. Okay. Do you drink it black, or do you put stuff in your coffee, or how do you drink it?
If I'm in Colombia, I drink it black, as do the locals. But here, I'll put a splash of half and half.
Okay. So, we had internally, we have a staff of 8 of us. And that question actually kind of was very divided in between the people who drink it black and the people who don't. And the people who don't you drink it with, again, splash. Some people put, oat milk and other things in there, but it created a lot of controversy where people thought the people who drank it black were, had a little screw loose in there. But so sorry to digress about that. I wanted to talk about like how coffee and why coffee, because I would think in Colombia, that is to try and get into that business. I mean, I don't know a lot about Colombia, but I'm guessing the coffee business is a very major producer in that area. And was this like a new entity startup, or did you merge with an existing coffee supplier down there? I'm just curious because it seemed like you were trying to based off get in there at into a very competitive market.
Coffee is the national product in Colombia. It's known for its coffee. And Colombia is the third largest coffee producing nation globally. The partners at Legacy Group found Colombia prior to starting the coffee company, right? And they saw that it was a market itself that was ripe for disruption and opportunity and arbitrage like returns for investors. We founded the Green Coffee Company. It was built from the ground up. We did a seed funding round in 2018 that we initiated to buy the first set of assets. It was under 1,000 acres. And it's grown over time. The initial strategy was somewhat of an alternative to a syndicated real estate offering where investors could buy assets that produce cash flow through agriculture. And it was sort of, a hedge against inflation, an alternative to a syndicated apartment building for guys that want exposure overseas. And it evolved over time to be like the idea or to be what it is today, right? We're the number one largest coffee producer in Colombia with 6,600 acres and 7.7 million coffee trees. And it's grown from nothing. And so it was birthed as an idea 5.5 years ago. And the partners live and work out of Medellin. They're both Americans as well. One is a corporate attorney, is one of the partners, and the founder is a corporate accountant by trade. The guys we're very much involved in the day-to-day of the business. We're very active in our role. We meet landholding families in person, like talk to all the family members, multi-year negotiations. It's a very fragmented market. You have to be on the ground. You have to have locals. You have to be knowledgeable. At the company itself, we appointed a CEO and president who is a 25-year veteran of Colombian agriculture. We have the former CFO for Fox Latin America, former head agronomist for Starbucks Colombia. So we've stacked a team in our corner, and it is very fragmented. You need to negotiate, like I said, for long periods of time. Often there's seller financing involved. There's distress scenarios. It's not an easy market to break into. So us being on the ground there and having a local team of expertise has allowed us to really kind of disrupt the industry and kind of revolutionize the way coffee is produced. That's our main focus. This is our flagship portfolio company. It's the only one we have open for investment from investors.
Yeah, and it looks like there's over 400 full-time employees. And I have somebody I grew up with who went and started out doing microbrew with beer. And now it's blown up into, they got at least one, I think they have one or two $30 million facilities, and they've just completely exploded up in the Northeast. But the interesting thing I find, also with business in a country like Colombia is, when I was getting my master's, we did a lot of, analysis on international real estate. And people think, oh, great, all you're doing is just buying real estate in another country. It's, no different. And people forget about the two other major components, which are land dealings and how land is transferred. Could be very different than in the US, where here we get title insurance. I don't think many other countries have that type of, insurance programs and stuff. But also you're dealing with another currency. And, if one currency is doing much better than the other, that can have a significant impact as well, just on the investment. So it's very interesting to see, and love seeing successful companies go from basically starting it to now having over 25 farms, 6,000 acres of land, 7 million coffee trees. And you brought in, I think, the right team from what it sounds like. And that's one of the things I was kind of going to roll into, especially going back a little bit to the money raise side of things, in any type of business. Curious to get your opinion, how important is it to have not only yourself, but the ownership of the company and people who work with, their background, their experience to raise money? How do you view the importance of that?
I would put that very high on the importance scale. People want to know the team behind the opportunity. That's one of the first questions that's always asked. Why are you capable? Why Legacy Group, right? Like, why Josh? Why the rest of the teams? What makes the partners capable? So that story of the background and how it fits into the overall thesis of your investment strategy is crucial to your success.
So, and that's one thing I think with people when they get started, I've seen is, in our space in real estate, there's certain aspects where you can move much quicker to go, hey, I own a few rentals in this, and now I want to go do a syndication. But I think, that track record you mentioned and having, several years behind your belt, especially, the longer you have that history, I think people can be more comfortable. It's not that, hey, look, it's somebody who is just sitting there, trying to raise money to do something that they don't have the experience in, or putting their money at risk. Imperative that those people really know and understand the business that they're doing. And especially if you, again, like your company, we have 8 employees, which I think is a lot. Just the coffee company that people invest in has over 400 employees. So there's a lot there. Curious, because you do, with the size of the company, are there specific people who I'll call, or like the coffee whisperers who know, like when you go to acquire land, I'm guessing, there's, soil testing and stuff like that to make sure it can actually grow coffee. And then kind of basically similar to like my buddy who does the beer brewing. It's like there's several people that are the ones who kind of make the potion or make the magic. Is it very similar in coffee as well? Is it, I guess, sensitive to, land and Mother Nature?
Definitely. So we have a team not only of financial professionals, but coffee professionals. So rigorously analyze soil, weather patterns, state of the trees, how much production is expected, if there's opportunity to value add through planting more trees. We do a very thorough analysis of each acquisition, and that's conducted by the team of the CFO, partners, CEO. Like I mentioned, CEO background is agro-industrial engineering. And yes, we are very analytical in our approach. We run financial models on the acquisitions. We determine payback periods. Absolutely.
So on the money raise side, I think you're doing another raise of looking for, I think, another 25 million.
That's right.
That you're in the raise right now. Is that money already, in real estate? I will use the example. Some people try and get the money to target the asset, and some people already know or already have the asset. Then they go get the money. In your line of work, I'm guessing you already have where you're going to use. I know you're going to get some equity and some, I think, debt financing as well, potentially as part of. If I was reading the raise properly, I'm guessing that money you have a specific need or goal for what that money is going to be used for. Correct?
Yes, of course. So we actually, it's a $25 million equity raise, but it's being run currently with a $75 million debt raise, which we're doing from institutional lenders. So we've mapped out use of proceeds for the full 100 million. A little bit more than half of it is going to be for more farmland acquisition and infrastructure build out. The balance being a coffee roasting facility in the US, and then a distilling unit in Colombia, so we could monetize the coffee byproducts, and with the goal of creating ethanol and alcohol from that. So we've mapped it out entirely where we expect to spend the money. Certain acquisitions, the conversations are ongoing for the acquisition piece, but we don't have 100% of it planned. Like this is exactly where it's going to go, but we know where each piece of it is earmarked to be spent.
And for people who are looking to raise money, that's a question you're going to need to answer. And again, on the real estate side of things, you may not have a specific asset or deal as you're going into it. We call them sometimes blind pools, but you should have a buy box of here's what we're looking at. Here's some of the things we've been negotiating. Here's, the type of asset we're going to look for, and explain to them not only about that buy box, but depending on your return structure and your waterfall with that investor, rolling that into here's the reason why we're looking at that, because here's how it's going to perform, or here's how we project it to perform, or here's what we're going to do to get it to perform, to get that full circle of this is how you're going to get your money back. Because that's always a question investors will ask is, when am I getting my money back and how am I getting my money back, is something we see in real estate. Do you see that a lot on your end as well?
Of course. Yeah. I'd say, what happens? What's the exit strategy? That's a constant question that we get. Every single person will ask that.
The ones we've been getting a lot, which I haven't had in the past, I'm curious if you get this too, is we'll have people ask us, is our investment guaranteed? We get that question. And of course, our response is, unfortunately, no, we are not a FDIC insured bank paying 0.1% interest in your account that's insured. But, I found that interesting. As we get to wrap up, quick question I was going to ask you is, is there one thing over your career that you've learned, or a piece of advice you could give to people out there who are looking to raise money that, a takeaway for people that, something you've learned over time?
I would treat every investor as if you would treat your best friends or your family members. You really need to believe in the product. If it's something you don't believe in, it's going to transmit into your communications with people. I mean, just you got to do right by your investors. That's for sure. And be completely transparent, be honest, be invested in the project as well. I mean, those are really important things. And it'll just come back to you if you don't. We've been doing that from the beginning, but I've just seen it so many times with other firms and heard horror stories about it. But just be transparent, be communicative, be honest, treat people the way you want to be treated, and that'll come back to you in droves.
If people want to learn more about your investment or reach out to you, what is the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, I'd love to get in touch with any of your listeners here. You can contact us by email at investor.relations@legacy-group.co, or you could find us on our website at legacy-group.co.
And we will include that in the show notes for everyone as well. Josh, thanks for joining us today on this episode of Creating Wealth Simplified. And as always, people, make sure to subscribe to our podcast and also check us out on YouTube as well. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining Lauren and I on this episode of the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. Each week, we bring you expert education, experience, and information in a digestible format to help you identify investment opportunities so you can build wealth through real estate and take action toward your financial goals. Enjoy the show, share with a friend, or subscribe to the show and leave us a review.